to the 3 and Out podcast, episode 9 now on our scripts. Brett Schaubs, Mike Cicchetti, Ben Pope. After week 6 of the NFL season, we are wrapping up play after another strong week. The Birds are still undefeated after this weekend strong. The Broncos have also sucked yet again. It's been a week of continuing headlines, but why don't we go to a story that was really developing and a lot of people were talking about going into this week. It was the Buffalo Kansas City game, right? Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, that was the main storyline this week. Could either side potentially bring down the opposing quarterback? But if you look at the game as a whole, it really wasn't so much about the quarterback, but more so about the defense and how both sides played the ball defensively. Buffalo ended up coming away with the football game, and they were victorious against the Kansas City Chiefs. The real question here, guys, though, if you look at both sides and how dominant they were in this game, as far as showing their prevalence and their confidence in playing football this season, do we see any other team in the AFC taking down one of KC or Buffalo? Or do we think this is potentially the presetter for another Buffalo Kansas City AFC championship game?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, but we know Buffalo and KC, they're in a tier by themselves. They're the only two teams I trust in the NFL right now. But you look at a team like last year, Cincinnati, who came into the playoffs at 10-7. They are hot at the right time and they made the Super Bowl. It being a single elimination playoffs, you get a team like that. The AFC is so strong. You get Baltimore, who's 3-3, but they're a lot better than the record shows. You get them, you get, whoever in the AFC. There are a lot of strong teams. All it takes is one game. And I mean, even the strongest of teams like those two can be due for a slip up at any point. But looking at, their height, I don't see either of these two teams not making the AFC championship. They're clearly the two strongest in the AFC.
So while I agree with Mike that these two are the best teams in the NFL, I don't think it's clear cut that they will be meeting each other in the AFC title game, mainly because of one team that you already mentioned, Mike, in the Cincinnati Bengals. They just won their third game this past week, being a completed Saints team, but they were still able to do so in an impressive fashion, winning with the game-winning touchdown to Jamar Chase back where they won the championship, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So I'm still buying into the Bengals. They were my top team in the AFC coming into this year. They've had a bit of an uneasy start, but I think they've kind of gotten on a roll since starting out 0-2. They're 3-1. Only loss was a game where it was kind of down to the defensive minds of both coaches against the Ravens 2 weeks back. So I have confidence in Cincinnati, and they've shown enough in the past month to give me confidence there. And I would still say that the Miami Dolphins are in the conversation here as well. I know that people like to forget because of recency bias, because they haven't had their starting quarterback for 2 weeks. But you have to remember and recognize how dominant Miami was playing the first 3 weeks, how impressive they looked with Tua under center. It's going to take a little bit of time for Tua to reacclimate himself. We'll see what he's able to do this week in prime time Sunday night against the Steelers. But I still have a lot of confidence in that Miami team to say that it's not clear cut that Buffalo and Kansas City will be making the AFC title game.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot more to be said about this script. And as far as how much left the AFC contenders have left in competing against Buffalo and Kansas City. Obviously, this game was a precursor to what we could see and the amount of competition that is left to display. But don't forget, we still have Cincinnati that Ben mentioned, the Miami Dolphins, the potential New York Jets as they continue their hot streak in the last few weeks. You never know. But with that, we will leave that story aside for week 7. Moving forward, we jump to the NFC, to a team that that may not necessarily have had the best week in the world, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Had a very underwhelming loss against the home Pittsburgh Steelers in Acrisure Stadium. Now, I still think it's Heinz Field, but okay. Anyways,
Had to drop in the Steelers reference in there. My goodness.
Second favorite team, you know.
I could have just
Cheers
said
to
Big
that.
Ben, but we'll leave it there.
True.
There's the reference. But Buccaneers offense just couldn't really seem to get anything going against the Steelers defense. They tried to move the ball steadily with Leonard Fournette. They ended up getting a touchdown towards the end of the game, but in the first half, it took them a very long time to establish the run against the Steelers offensive line. On the pass game, didn't really see much out of Evans or Godwin at all. There wasn't much to be said, from Tom Brady. It looked like he almost struggled getting that football out of his hands. I believe there was a point where he almost either had a fumble or did have a fumble in the backfield. But another underwhelming start for the Buccaneers. They are, I believe, now tied for record-wise with the Atlanta Falcons in the division at 3-3. So the question is, do we still believe the Buccaneers have enough pieces or opportunities to potentially win a playoff game this year?
Yeah, I find it hard to say no, especially at this point when I think in the NFC, only two teams have truly established themselves as quality teams. And I would say that's the Cowboys and the Eagles. The Niners have been probably there as well, but then they lose to said Falcons this past week in a just really ugly game for them, uncharacteristic. Oh my God, uncharacteristically sloppy. Jeez. My God, that was uncharacteristically sloppy as well. But yeah, aside from the Cowboys and the Eagles, I don't think anyone in the NFC has really played up to par. I know the Vikings are 5-1, but they are still very questionable for me. They've pretty much beaten teams that they should beat, and it's in closer matchups than they should. So that gives me reason to worry. The Rams, we've obviously talked about them a few times. Beat the Panthers this past weekend, but didn't show anything that really stood out to me that they've solved things. So, yeah, I think Tampa, even though they have struggled, it's mainly to do with their offense. The D gave up 20 points to Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky this past weekend, but that's probably the worst game that they've had all season, aside from the KC game where they got torched on Sunday night. I still believe in that defense a lot. I think it's one of the best in the NFC, if not the best. So I have no reason to have caution there. And then the offense has been the biggest concern, and Leonard Fournette's been fine. He's been able to get the ball in his hands pretty much either way, on the ground or through the air. They're getting their wide receivers back healthy. I know that's been kind of a trend for a couple weeks, but I can't really doubt Brady here. Yeah, I think there's been a little bit cause for concern, but until I see something that's truly just awful out of them, and this Pittsburgh game was surprisingly close to that. Yeah, I'll still believe in the Bucs. Do I believe they'll win a playoff game? Yeah, I would still find it hard to believe that they wouldn't win at least one playoff game come January.
I still think Tampa Bay is going to go out and win a playoff game. It all just depends on where the cards roll. Likely at this point, the way they're playing, you could be fair to assume that it's going to be a wild card game for the Buccaneers. But again, still a lot of football left to be played. We move on to another team in the NFC, going over to the gritty division. And that is the NFC North with the Packers. Green Bay, they have had a lot of disappointment in the last 6 weeks. Most recently, losing to the New York Jets in Lambeau Field. Seemed like Aaron Rodgers was just trying to play too much hero ball. And this sort of just was a situation where Zach Wilson, Breece Hall, and the company just ran the football, ran it efficiently. Breece Hall, I believe, is over 300 yards rushing now in his last 2 games. Defense came up strong where they needed to, and the Jets come away with the victory. So we put it at this. After the Jets beat the Packers this Sunday, is it fair to say that this latest loss for Green Bay has legitimately put them out of playoff contention?
0% chance. There's no way. I'm not giving up hope on the Packers simply because we know what Aaron Rodgers can do. We know the run game, and we know that defense is still top 5. They have a really strong team. The only thing I think they have to figure out is the receiving options. I think once, they get more familiarity with Rodgers, meaning mostly Dobbs and Christian Watson, the 2 rookies, I think it would just be more free-flowing at that point because the team isn't – I don't know. There's just like a missing piece. Who is Devontae Adams in that offense? Their leading receiver is Alan Lazard. He isn't doing, anything crazy, though. But I just think their defense is strong enough to carry them, and you know what the run game can do, and you have Aaron Rodgers. I think it's as simple as that. They're not out of contention for me. They're not, I do have my doubts about them because of that, but I mean, we're a third of the way through the season. Anything can happen up until that point.
Yeah, I'm just double checking here my stats. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that discounting the New England game, which they went into overtime and obviously scored to win that game, had a couple scores in that second half. Green Bay in their other 5 games has a total of 1 touchdown in the second half. AKA their offense, if it doesn't click in the first half, they have not been able to recover in the second half. Their second half offense has been atrocious. Among the contenders, it's right up there with one of the worst in the league. I think that their inability to truly establish not only a run game, but some consistency with their usage of both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon is somewhat blasphemous. They are their by far 2 best skill position players, and they're not consistently able to give them a good and solid workload. Like you saw A.J. Dillon, he got 6 targets this past week. He hadn't gotten pretty much any looks in the passing game the previous 3 games, and that demoted Aaron Jones's work in the passing game. No, it shouldn't be like you raise one running back up and the other one falls down. No, you should be using those 2 as your primary playmakers in your offense. The defense, I'm not going to give them any flack because pretty much any of the mostly looking at the last 2 games against the Giants and the Jets, but when they struggle, it's in the second half when the Packers offense is doing absolutely nothing. So honestly, they're kind of playing deflated. To answer the question at hand, I really want to say that they have no shot, but again, the NFC is really bad. Like, again, the Cowboys, the Eagles, probably the 49ers and the Bucs, probably all playoff locks. Then you got underperforming teams in the Rams, the Packers themselves. The Vikings are at 5-1. They're probably going to be making the playoffs as the division winner. That's probably what you're looking at in the playoffs, unless one of these teams like the Giants, who've been a bit of a surprise, the Falcons, who've been a bit of a surprise, maybe like the Cardinals or the Seahawks jump into it. Like, that's probably what you're looking at for the playoffs, like those same 7 teams that we saw last year, plus the Vikings. So it's a situation where I'd love to say that Green Bay's out of it, but they have Aaron Rodgers. They have one of the best head coaches in the league in Matt LaFleur. There's been a lot of slander about Matt LaFleur recently as well, just because they've lost these 2 games. That's not on Matt LaFleur. It's partially on him, but you got to look at Aaron Rodgers in the offense. That's the main culprit of this. But to answer the question in general, I think the Packers still have a very good shot at making the playoffs. They should not be eliminated from playoff consideration.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that you mentioned as well is just how bad this conference is. I mean, you take a look at just a few teams. We talked about the Vikings, the Giants, as of right at this moment, San Francisco, Tampa Bay. The other three spots are pretty much wide open for anybody to snag between either Los Angeles, Green Bay, potentially maybe Seattle or Atlanta. But actually, let's throw in Philadelphia right there, put some respect on their names as well. But at the end of the day, I think there's still a solid chance for the Packers to make it to the playoffs. It's just a matter of how fast can they fix the problems on offense. But again, still a lot of football left to be played here in the season. Moving on, we jump back to the AFC, to a team that in the last 2 weeks, fellas, we've almost sort of wrote off the script for this season just because of how bad and inefficient they've played football. That's the Indianapolis Colts. Nonetheless, they come out this past Sunday and they, granted, almost lost, but came back and won it against the Jacksonville Jaguars despite a late surge by Trevor Lawrence and that offense. Matt Ryan almost threw for 400 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. Michael Pittman carried the receiving corps on his back. Defense came up strong. It was just overall a sound win for the Indianapolis Colts. They now move to 3-2-1 on the year. Were we too early to doubt the Indianapolis Colts, or do we think this win doesn't necessarily reflect much of the football that we've seen out of the Colts lately?
I would say that we probably did give the Colts a little bit too much flack in the beginning of the season. I do believe that this is their first really good win. I think their other two, namely against the Chiefs, which was kind of just miscommunications on special teams by Kansas City, and then their win against Denver, which was just a really ugly game in general. I don't think I was giving them any credit for winning those games. I think I was just faulting both Kansas City and Denver for losing those games. But I think we should give Indianapolis a little bit of credit for beating a Jacksonville team that pretty much dominated them their first time seeing each other in week 2. I will say that I would like to see a little bit more from Indianapolis. There's still a long ways to go. Tennessee coming off the bye, they're 3-3. They're going to be facing each other this week already for the second time. Tennessee won their first matchup, so it'd be big for Indianapolis to split and beat Tennessee this weekend. But yeah, I think we should give them a little bit more credit. And they've been doing this the last couple of weeks without their main playmaker, Jonathan Taylor, on offense, and then without, oh my goodness, what did he change his name to? Shaquille Leonard on defense. So give them credit for playing without their 2 main playmakers on both sides of the ball. But I'd like to see a little bit more.
Yeah, these past 2 weeks do nothing for me. I mean, they're winning games they're supposed to win. I mean, I still need to see longevity. They really haven't shown a lot beside, last drive. Shout out Alec Pierce for that touchdown. But they don't look, overly impressive or strong. And I think they're, as of this point, just a team that other opponents would look on their calendar and be like, we can win this game, because the Colts don't look strong at all. Granted, their defense statistically is doing pretty well, but they just don't provide a lot of firepower offensively, which can change because Jonathan Taylor hasn't been Jonathan Taylor when he was healthy. If he comes back, they're hoping for that surge when he gets there. But I mean, as of right now, no, I don't think we gave them too much flack. I think it was deserving of so. But with all that being said, you still got to credit they are above 500 now. And you just hope, for their sake, that they can hold on to this and run with it.
Yeah, and I think at this point, it's fair to assume that obviously this division is pretty much nobody's guarantee. Now the Colts, are over 500. The Jaguars, despite losing, are still fairly strong with a lot of football to go. The Titans are still, I believe, over 500 the last time I checked. And then that leaves Houston, who I have not officially wrote off script yet, despite their struggles early on. So this division is pretty much
we write them off compared to the other
you
three.
Know what, anybody else? Huh?
Compared to the other three?
Compared to the other three, it's going to be extremely difficult to win the division.
Right. There's zero shot for Houston. There is zero shot for Houston.
No. Spin this little tale. I don't know if you were just like trying not to write them off because it's 7 games in, or what world do the Texans win this division?
I don't think there's a world they do win this division. Okay. I'm just trying to be hopeful for the Houston Texans. Trying to give them a little
realistic. We got to be realistic. But I remember 2-3 weeks ago, you were talking about the Jags have this division.
They're saying it. That ain't it anymore.
I know the Colts and the Titans have played up to, more so the Titans, have played up to their standards. And now the Jags are, despite being in third place in that same group, I would say, because they're all on like the same echelon where any of them, it's really up for grabs between the three of them. And yeah, I think that division, those 3 teams are, for the most part, mids. But I think it'll be a dogfight for the division lead at the end of the season, anyways.
So speaking of close divisions, we're going to move to the AFC East with 2 teams that potentially have passed the Miami Dolphins in the standings. You have the New York Jets coming off of 2 big wins against the Miami Dolphins with a 40 bomb, and then the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. Meanwhile, the New England Patriots over the Cleveland Browns and Detroit Lions the last 2 weeks. Both have been strong, but Miami is still one of the dominant teams in the AFC East. So I guess the question is, have either of them passed the Miami Dolphins in the AFC East? Do we see one of them potentially hurdling in the standings over Miami?
No. Next question.
Ben?
That's pretty much it. Because the Jets have played 2 teams in Miami with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, and then the Packers basically beating themselves this past week. Credit to the Jets. They've looked great. However, their 4-2 record probably not indicated how well they've played. Like, once they beat the Steelers and Zach Wilson came back with a great drive, I was like, let's see them pass the ball more. Let's see what Zach Wilson can do. And he's pretty much like throwing for 50% of his throws. The past couple weeks, he's thrown maybe like 20, 22 attempts. They've like run the ball like really heavily. So I haven't seen much out of Zach Wilson to like give me that much impression on him. The run game has looked phenomenal. Brees the Beast is here and he is ready to dominate. And this defense has looked amazing for the Jets. Between Quinn Williams on the D-line, you've got Sauce Gardner. They have looked phenomenal on the defensive side of the ball. But until you see Zach Wilson do what Tua did in his first 3 weeks, no chance. And then the Patriots have Bailey Zappi. That's all you need to say.
And then with that, credit to the Jets and the Patriots taking advantage, going 2-0 in the last 2 weeks while Miami has lost both, or has lost the past 3 weeks. Like Ben said earlier, people are forgetting how dominant Miami looked when Tua was there. He'll come back. I mean, these teams don't touch Miami. I don't think Miami is on Buffalo's level, but neither of these teams are on Miami's level.
Yeah, I think at this point, it's almost, you have to assume Miami's going to be back at that level with Tua Tagovailoa back under center. Everybody's forgetting and writing off that script of how increasingly good they were compared to the last few weeks of play that they've had. But I agree. I don't think the Jets or Patriots pass them in the standings at all. If anybody does, I think it's the Jets, considering of how more efficient they've played football. But I think Miami stays right where they are in second. Lastly, we go back to the NFC. There is one team left in the league that's undefeated, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles at 6-0. Behind them are two teams that are 5-1, the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. We've talked before about how, while both of these teams have played good football, they're still very much in question. How long can they handle this success? What's their duration on winning football games throughout the season? So the question proposed to you two is, which one do we believe is the more fraudulent team that's 5-1? Is it the New York Giants or is it the current division leader, Minnesota Vikings? I'll pass this one to Ben first.
Okay, well, I'll pass this one to Brett first.
Ooh.
All right, so the host will have to kick off this. I honestly think that it's so hard for me to. I'm gonna have to go with the Giants. It's the go-to answer. I feel like for most people, considering the tightrope they've been walking on the last few weeks. Yes, Brian Dable has played phenomenal football with his coaching, and he's gotten the most out of Daniel Jones. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the team for what it is. After Saquon Barkley, there's not much left in the receiving corps. I don't know how much it's going to last. At least with Minnesota, I know there's a lot of talent there that you can fall back on. There's a good scheme on defense. And I think there's a pretty good chance they come out division winners at this point, looking at the Bears and the Lions as well. So I have to assume it's going to be the Giants that are more fraudulent in this case.
And that's kind of the answer that I was hoping for. I think it's the Vikings. When you look at Daniel Jones and what he's been able to do the past few weeks, just looking at his stats simply against Green Bay and Baltimore, who are two teams that I think the Giants had maybe 10% to beat either of them, especially the Baltimore game, which was completely surprising. He has no turnovers in that game, and he's completing nearly 74% of his passes, which is really good, especially against a Green Bay defense that's been really strong. I know the Baltimore secondary has struggled a decent amount this season, but still, it's who are you competing against? Kenny Golladay, who's not playing anymore. Wan'Dale Robinson, in his first game in 5 weeks. Darius Slayton, who was like a car salesman 3 weeks ago. Literally against no one. Daniel Bellinger, I don't know, dog. Whereas the Vikings, they have not impressed me in any of their wins. I shouldn't say that. They haven't impressed me since week 1 against their division rivals in the Packers.
Yep.
That game was phenomenal. They didn't do much in the second half, but they absolutely dominated Green Bay in the first half. So absolute confidence there. Otherwise, they lost to the Eagles. The Eagles are undefeated. Okay. They've beaten the Lions, the Saints, the Bears, and the Dolphins. The Dolphins with a backup quarterback. All those teams are below 500. So with that, they're beating up on teams that they should, yet they're not beating up on them. It's all been one-score games. So I don't know what's up with Minnesota. They've been another team that's kind of disappeared in halves. For them, it's been the first half in most of these games, with exception to their Green Bay game, obviously. They just haven't looked consistent through 4 quarters of football. So with that and the expectations that I had for Minnesota, I am not buying into them, whereas the Giants have beaten 2 teams that I have in high regard, and they beat the Titans, who are currently right up there for a division lead. So 3 good football teams, and they're playing way over expectations right now. So I have to have some confidence in there, whereas the Vikings, they are kind of underperforming to me. They are the bigger frauds here.
Mike?
I gotta agree with Ben. I mean, I loved the Vikings coming in, but the Giants offensively are just playing such smart football. Daniel Jones has, I would say Dable is getting the most out of him, but he's not really, jumping off the page stat wise, but he's playing smart football. He's doing what he needs to do to get them a win. And as long as they have Saquon Barkley, I think they can win anything. And I think a big part of why I think this is because of the defense. The defense has been playing at such a high level, especially with some of the bigger names on that side of the football missing a few weeks here and there. But it's really weird to say because, I just look at the Vikings and they just seem much more complete. But the Giants are playing just better football, smarter football. Now they don't have the firepower that the Vikings do, but like Ben mentioned, all their wins that the Vikings have should be wins. And in those wins, they're not, impressive. Yeah.
I have a quick question for you guys. It's a bit of trivia. Who do you think has more turnovers this year? Simple enough. Kirk Cousins or Daniel Jones?
I'm going to say it's Kirk Cousins.
Do
Yeah.
you feel confident in that?
I know Daniel Jones has like 3 picks this year.
So between turnovers, so interceptions and fumbles,
Yep.
Daniel Jones has 4.
Okay.
Kirk Cousins has 5. So Daniel Jones has less turnovers than Kirk Cousins does. Both not a lot, but Kirk Cousins known for not throwing many, if any, interceptions, where Daniel Jones is the quote-unquote fumble king. He's got less turnovers than Kirk Cousins, so that's got to count for a little bit of something.
Shout out Dable. Coach of the run.
Shout out Dable.
Shout out Giants. Shout out Jay Hill. Them boys.
Shout out Jay Hill.
Shout out
Jay
Jay
Hill.
Hill.
We were in class with Jay Hill today, and we were watching the Yankee game. He would not acknowledge us at all, Mike. He basically just shut himself down. He didn't want to talk to any of us. No ridicule. I just tried tapping him on the back. Like I put my hand right there and I was like, "How you doing, buddy?" And then as soon as I walked away, he dusted off where I touched him.
So, I get a call. I don't want to do this because I love Jay Hill, but I got to call him out. I was having a text conversation with Jay Hill about a week ago at this point, and I texted him something along the lines of shout out Aziz, right? We all know Aziz. Giants fan, Jay Hill, responds, who? I opened the message and didn't respond. Because as a Giants fan, you should know Aziz, and you should know that I am a recipient of the Aziz disease. We'll leave it there.
As we should.
I think we're all recipients of the Aziz disease here on the
I would disagree. I would disagree.
Well, anywho.
I think his brother's coming in the draft next year, too.
What's his brother's name?
BJ.
BJ Ojolari.
I'm pretty sure that's his brother. Let me just double check so I'm not talking on my garbage.
As you confirm that, that wraps up our major storylines here in the 3 and Out podcast. So we will move on to our games of the week, a bit of a shorter episode this week, heading into week 7. So whenever we are ready, I'm going to start with Ben this time while Mike finishes his search. What is our game of the week on Benny's end this week?
Well, we talked about the return of the young prince, and he will return under the lights on Sunday Night Football. I am talking about, of course, the Steelers versus the Miami Dolphins. I'm not talking about Mitch Trubisky, by the way. Kenny Pickett, eat your heart out. Tua is going to be back for the first time since he suffered a concussion back in week 4 against Cincinnati. I'm looking forward to this game a lot, and I think that Miami will be able to reaffirm their dominance in this game against the Steelers. The Steelers are coming off a cute win against Tampa. They're like, oh, we can sweep the Florida teams. Yeah. No, you're going to get wrecked by Mike McDaniel and the squad this week. They are not going to be messing around. Jalen Waddle is dealing with a little bit of an injury right now, but he should be good to go. No concerns here. Even if Tua isn't 100%, I do believe that Miami will be able to win this game and win this game handily. And then the media will be like, oh, we forgot how good Miami is. Let's give them credit once more. So I will be ready for that on Monday morning.
Mike?
Just to, circle back to BJ. BJ is the younger brother of Aziz, goes to LSU, and he's a projected first rounder, potential top 10 pick. So shout out BJ. Shout out BJ. We get the BJ disease too. Well, never mind. My game of the week is my game of the week is Colts at Titans. These two teams fighting for the AFC South top spot. Both teams started, had very disappointing starts to the season, and they both recently come around. So I think this game will kind of give us a good understanding of how to gauge them moving forward. In their first meeting, the Titans did defeat Indy. This game is now in Tennessee. Tennessee also got a new stadium. They were approved for a dome stadium.
Yep.
So yeah, Titans, Colts, two underwhelming teams kind of coming into their own. I think we'll see a good matchup. Do we have a JT update? Do we know if he's coming back this week or
expected to play this week?
Okay. So if so, we'll get a hopefully good, running back matchup there with the projected top two backs coming into the season. The running backs have been so weird this year. Because like Miles Sanders is top 5 in rushing yards.
Josh Jacobs,
Cordero Patterson was up there before his injury.
Yep. Just the whole landscape of running backs has changed completely. But with that, that brings it to my game of the week. And I actually have a strange one. And that's the Falcons and the Bangles this week. Now, a lot of times I think the Falcons have been written off, overlooked as far as the success that they've had. They're 500, and they are completely not out of this division race yet. They're tied with Tampa Bay right now in the record standings in the NFC South. And if you look at the narrative for the last 3 or 4 weeks, Atlanta's sort of given a fit to a lot of these top contenders so far in the conference. I'm talking about, of course, San Francisco, Los Angeles. If things continue this way, I could very well see Atlanta giving a fit to Cincinnati and potentially making this a closer game than what people imagine. Joe Burrow has struggled in the past with this offense with teams in the NFC, such as Dallas in the past. So I could see a closer game than people expect in this one, but should be a good one in Falcons and Bengals. And with that, myself with the Bengals and Falcons, Mike with the Colts and Titans, and then Ben with the Steelers and Dolphins on Sunday night. And with that, it wraps up our games of the week, and we move into our Stan Sessions, our last segment here on the 3 and Out podcast. So if you guys got your 2 stands, we're ready to rock. We're going to start with Mike here on this one. Mike, who's your first stand after week 6?
My first stand is Kenneth Walker. Shout out Kenny, a rookie running back, 2nd rounder, I believe, for the Seattle Seahawks. He was, up there with Breece Hall. Many had them at 1A, 1B. Bruiser style running back, and he is now the lead back in Seattle. It was only a matter of time. He adds a new element to that team after losing Rashad Penny and BC's boy, blanking on his name.
Travis Homer,
there it is. Yeah, shout out Kenny. Has, I believe, 22 missed tackles on 44 rushing attempts, which leads the league and
does lead the league.
a wild stat for a rookie, big bruiser. I love my big bruises. Shout out, Kenny. Shout out Javonte. Shout out, Damian Pierce. Love a good bruiser. And Kenny is right there. So shout out my guy Kenny. His first, really game as a lead back with a lot of over 10 rushing attempts. So go Kenny, go Hawks, BC's third favorite team. Oddly enough, the best one out of the top three.
Somehow, yeah.
And shout out Gino too. I made a tweet last night. I don't know if I saw it. He did see it. That I said, Broncos traded for the wrong Seahawks Q. And left it as simple as that.
And
hey, Brett, real quick. What's the Broncos' record if they traded for Geno Smith?
6-0.
All right, so I'm gonna go into my stand here. Oh my God, gotta recover from that one. Mine is Big Q, Quinnen Williams from the New York Jersey Jets. Quinnen Williams had a phenomenal game against the Green Bay mother-loving Packers this past weekend. 2 sacks and a forced fumble, was really putting the pressure on Aaron Rodgers in that fraudulent offensive line. They did a phenomenal job. He was pretty much the lead for this defense in a phenomenal game. They held Green Bay to a touchdown late, so only 10 points in general. They looked phenomenal, really were the backbone for the Jets in this game, and gave the offense some support to get their offense into gear in the second half. So liked what I saw from Big Q. Shout out Sauce as well with a big cheese head. Quinnen Williams, my first stand of the week.
All right, and that passes it to me. Also defense. I'm a Kaiir Elam stan. I love this pick. Kaiir Elam got, I believe it is his first NFL interception this year against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. If you look at Elam's stats through the past 6 games, he's only had 1 game where he's allowed more than 3 receptions. Everything else is 3 or less for Kaiir Elam, despite having an 80% snap share for the Bills this season. He's been phenomenal in the secondary room for Sean McDermott, and I think this game sort of proved it as well. Obviously, the interception helped in his stat line, but yeah, we're starting to see the breakout mold in this kid, and I'm a Kaiir Elam stan.
I am a big rookie day for me. I am a Kayvon Tibbs stan. 5th. No, not 5th. What was he? 7th overall pick for the Giants out of Oregon. Edge rusher, got his first strip sack, and I believe his first sack. Don't quote me on that. As in NFL player against Lamar Jackson. That was odd. Against Lamar Jackson to, cap that for the Giants and then the 5-1. Shout out Kenny. Shout out KT. Both.
Ben?
All right, we'll go into my second stand here. And this dude is not someone I usually like to shout out, but he had a really good week, so we might as well give him the credit, especially since he's apparently getting traded to the Packers sometime soon. I'm a Chase Claypool stan A. Chase Claypool.
Mapletron?
What's up?
Mapletron?
We'll see. Chase Claypool had his most receiving yards in a game dating back 17 games to last year against the Denver Broncos. What a strong defense. But regardless, he had 7 catches for 96 yards and a game-winning touchdown from Mitch Trubisky this past week. So wanted to give some shout out to Chase Claypool. Was the lead receiver in a probably timeshare here with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Chase Claypool, who's the 1, who's the 2, who's the 3. Yeah, well, let's see if Chase Claypool stays a year as a Steeler. But regardless, he had a really good game. Shout out to the Canadians, eh? So Chase Claypool, my second stand of the week.
All right. We wrap this up with my last stand. I'm a Greg Dulcich stan. Oh, baby. The rookie tight end from the Broncos got his first career touchdown this past week in Los Angeles with Russell Wilson. If anybody watched the game, sort of just was able to break free at a nice design play and get the touchdown. He's absolutely sleeping on him. He'll prove you wrong.
No, I was sleeping during the game. Sorry.
Anyways,
It was for the better.
to put it short and sweet, I think this kid's going to be incorporated a lot more into the Broncos offense now that he's healthy, he's young, he's fast off the line, and I think you're going to see a lot more out of Greg Dulcich. So I'm a Dulcich stan. Loving him. Loved him since he was drafted. So
Hey, we said the same thing about Alberto. How's he?
yeah, he's hurt, unfortunately.
He was a healthy scratch a couple nights ago, so we'll move on from there.
Anyways, with that, it'll wrap up this episode of the 3 and Out podcast. Be sure to check us out on all our social medias as well as YouTube. Be sure to give us a like and follow and subscribe as well. Check us out on all our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts. And with that, it wraps up episode 9 of the 3 and Out podcast. For Ben Pope and Mike Cicchetti, I'm Brett Schaves. Take care and Brett your hair.